Democrats are willing to do anything and to hurt anyone to get their way, like they're doing with Judge Kavanaugh. They've been trying to destroy him since the very first second he was announced. I'll tell you what, they're trying to destroy a very fine person, and we can't let it happen. We can't let it happen.
Again, the rally was tonight in Tennessee. The president blaming Democrats for the delay in Kavanaugh's confirmation. Remember, please, it was a Republican request for a timeout while the FBI takes a week to reinvestigate. Earlier in the day, Trump, wanting to talk about trade, was forced to defend his Supreme Court selection from the White House Rose Garden.
You know, you look at his life until this happened. What a change he's gone through. What his family's gone through. The trauma for a man that's never had any accusation, he's never had a bad statement about him. Well, I watched him. I was surprised at how vocal he was about the fact that he likes beer, and he's had a little bit of difficulty. You know what happened? They're going back to high school, and they're saying he drank a lot one evening in high school. I tell you what, I happen to know some United States senators. One who is on the other side, who's pretty aggressive. I've seen that person in very bad situations. Look, here's what, I'm just saying, I'm not a drinker. I can honestly say I never had a beer in my life, okay?
Right.
It's one of my only good traits. I don't drink. Whenever they're looking for something good, I say, I never had a glass of alcohol. I've never had alcohol. I've just, for whatever reason. Can you imagine if I had? What a mess I'd be. I'd be the world's worst.
And then there was this remarkable moment during which, in a brief flash, having misunderstood what she said, the president went after ABC News White House correspondent Cecilia Vega.
Okay, question? Yeah, go ahead. Sure. She's shocked that I picked her.
No.
She's like in a state of shock.
I'm not thinking, Mr.
That's
President.
okay. I know you're not thinking. You never do.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
With us to talk about what it is we just witnessed there, Philip Rucker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House bureau chief for The Washington Post, and Kimberly Atkins, chief Washington reporter for The Boston Herald. Kim, you take the first swing at what it is we just witnessed there. I noted the White House transcript of the presser changes his reaction to, I know you're not thanking, you never do, when repeated airings of this say to us that he was saying, I know you're not thinking, you never do. What was that?
Yeah, well, the transcript is clearly a bit of revisionist history because it seemed pretty clear that he was insulting the reporter in that moment, in a moment where his Supreme Court nominee is being accused of mistreatment by women, at a moment where women are watching this White House very carefully, and at a moment that women are receiving the message that is coming from this presidency. I think it was pretty clear. I mean, the president has an acrimonious relationship with the press in general. We all know that. But I think what we saw today in the way he spoke to and the way he treated this reporter, Ms. Vega, as well as another reporter, Caitlin Collins, cries something else at a time where, I have women leaving voice messages, I know other reporters do, expressing their displeasure about what's going on in Washington all of the time, and we have midterms coming up. So I think that's a perilous approach for this president as he's trying to defend yet another person close to him, or that he's nominated, or who's on his team, or he wants to be on his team, who is being accused of by women of mistreatment.
Phil Rucker, a look at the numbers shows that this nominee's support is slipping and Kavanaugh is underwater in all cases. We kind of put together a sum of the polls. This is QPAC, no 48, yes 42, should the Senate confirm. The next one is also Quinnipiac. Blasey Ford, who do you believe most? by 7 points, Blasey Ford over Kavanaugh. And this was a big one. Almost 7 in 10 Americans support this reopening of the FBI background check. So perhaps, Phil, it's numbers like this, it's coverage like we've witnessed in the first 28 minutes and 30 seconds of this broadcast tonight that motivated what we just watched.
Yeah, perhaps that might be right, Brian. And this, of course, is a political decision about whether to confirm Judge Kavanaugh. But it's a decision being made by, realistically, 3 key senators, 3 key Republican senators who are on the bubble, so to speak, Jeff Flake, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. And I'm not sure that they're going to be persuaded by the public opinion surveys of the country at large. And one thing that they are thinking about is just the intensity behind Kavanaugh, of the support for Kavanaugh within the Republican Party. There's been a real rallying cry, and you've seen the president try to play that up to galvanize his supporters around Kavanaugh, in part by airing the grievances of men. We've talked a lot about this Me Too movement propelling enthusiasm among female voters for female candidates on the Democratic side, but there's a reverse effect happening within the Republican base, a smaller subset, of course, but within that base where men are rallying to Kavanaugh's defense and feeling like they are being unfairly targeted by this cultural reckoning we're going through as a country, and the president himself is fueling it. He's at the tip of the spear.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.